Good morning. Robin, are there any public speakers? No? Okay. I'd like a motion. Second. We're now approving the minutes of the last meeting. All in favor? Okay. Are there any changes to the work plan?
No changes.
Okay. I know this is cliche, but with a heavy heart, I'm saying goodbye to Joe Smith because of a couple reasons. Number one is when Jay asked me to chair this committee, and I had chaired capital construction for such a long time, and that was a rough one. And I said, I mean, he didn't have to sell me on it because the pay is so good. But I said to him, tell me something that is going to spark my interest. And he said, you're going to so enjoy working with Joe, that you just have a lot of similar characteristics, similar philosophies, and he said something like we sort of remind him of each other, the two of us, and. Similar to what? A hairstyle? We're both losing it a little bit. So Joe has lived up to everything that Jay had said, and you've been perfect. And although we haven't worked together for a long time, not nearly as long as Joe's tenure here of 33 years at the MTA. And then the heavy heart also is because Joe's leaving. Largely, I never know the real reason why someone leaves, whether it's my company or the MTA, but largely in part because of personal reasons. His child isn't well. I don't know if I should be saying that. I just realized that.
No secrets here.
Oh, okay. So that really adds to the way I feel right now. So later on in the meeting, we'll introduce Daryl, Joe's replacement, and okay. So if anybody wants to say goodbye or chat or whatever. Thanks. Okay.
All right. First, I want to start off with some good news. I'm pleased to report that the select bus service on the M15 is now running much more smoothly. The new pick went into effect on the 31st of October, and we're seeing significant improvements in service regularity and running times. Dwell times also has improved greatly as customers become more familiar with our fare payment process. During most of the day with the new schedule, we are now seeing a net 10 to 15% savings over limited service running times. And I think that's going to get better as eventually the traffic signal priority comes in later on in the beginning of 2011. You're going to see that line get run smoother and smoother. We also ran some important shuttles for the Long Island Railroad in support of their major signal work at Jamaica, which took place during the weekends of October 23rd, the 24th, and again on the 6th and 7th of November. We operated 147 runs on both days of this weekend with all three companies we used, Long Island Bus, MTA Bus, and New York City Transit. And the first weekend was supervised by some Long Island Bus dispatchers. We also used some MTA Bus dispatchers. We're mainly looking to run the service out of the closest depot, which saves us money at the end of the day. So it was a significant interagency effort. I also want to take the opportunity to introduce Daryl, who will serve as the acting head of MTA Bus operations, which my responsibilities are the Senior Vice President for New York City Transit, the President of MTA Bus and Long Island Bus. I have every confidence in Daryl, and I know I'm leaving the operations in excellent hands, to say the least. I will now turn the floor over to Daryl, who will give the operations report for this month.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Good morning. The performance highlights for the month of September are on pages 10 and 11 of the committee book. Overall combined bus MDBF was down 9.9% in September compared to September 2009 levels. However, the combined 12-month average of MDBF through September 2010 was up 2.3% compared to the prior 12-month average. September bus service performance measures declined slightly. Combined AM weekday pullouts were 99.2%, and combined PM weekday pullouts were 99.46% for the month of September. For the previous 12 months, combined AM weekday pullouts were 99.05, and combined PM weekday pullouts were 99.32. Completed trips were 98.64 for the month of September and 98.38 for the previous 12 months. I also want to inform the committee that by partnering with New York City Transit's Asset Recovery Unit on refuse and recycling services, MTA Bus has achieved immediate monthly savings of $11,000 compared to what MTA Bus was previously paying. This amounts to savings of $132,000 annually, and MTA Bus is now in compliance with MTA recycling guidelines. I also want to note that asset recovery sales and scrap operations have resulted in the following amounts credited to our bus operations through the first 9 months of 2010. $202,000 for LI Bus, $263,000 for MTA Bus, and $1.3 million for Department of Buses Transit Authority. To present safety performance, I'd like to introduce Mr. Steve Vidal, Vice President, Safety and Training.
Thank you, Darrell. Our comments on August customer and employee safety performance are listed on page 12 of the book. I'll begin by reporting that positive progress continues in 4 out of the 5 safety indicator categories. For the 5th indicator, collision injuries, the increase that I spoke about the last 2 meetings has not diminished. We continue to identify collisions involving multiple injuries that are inconsistent with the circumstances of the incident. As I indicated previously, the Public Transportation Safety Board continues to investigate and will report on cases involving 5 or more accidents, or 5 or more injuries. It is interesting, however, to note that the PTSB has dropped their investigation of one of the August collisions, which involved 15 injuries. In that particular incident, 7 of the injured individuals left the scene after they refused medical assistance, and the other one was treated by EMS at the scene and subsequently left unassisted. The remaining 7 injured were removed to a nearby hospital where 3 were treated in the emergency room and released, and 4 walked out of the emergency room without receiving any treatment. These collision injuries will continue to be scrutinized by Transit's Law Department. Now for the positive trends. The 12-month rate for combined bus collisions per million miles traveled across the 3 bus units is at minus 1.7% and is continuing to move in the right direction since January's negative performance of 5.7%. We remain focused on safety initiatives designed to improve performance in this area and anticipate further positive trends over the longer term. The 12-month rate for both customer accidents and customer accident injuries are trending in the right direction on a regional basis since we addressed these issues in March. Moreover, during the month of August, there were positive gains at all 3 bus entities in customer accidents, and at both Long Island Bus and MTA Bus in customer accident injuries. Concerning the poor results for customer accident injuries at New York City Transit in August, I want to note that we've reviewed all of the August safety incidents. Similar to what I mentioned a moment ago regarding collision-related injuries, we have determined that 1 out of every 3 of the injuries reported in August involved customers who refused medical treatment and left the scene unassisted. We are continuing to review and monitor customer injuries on a case-by-case basis. While the 12-month rate for employee on-duty lost time accidents is a modest 0.3% better than the 2009 level, it is considerably better than the January negative 25.2% performance, which we have worked the entire year to improve. The well-coordinated efforts across the 3 bus companies continues to mitigate lost time injuries, and this is reflected in August's 5.8% improvement over August of 2009. Now I'd like to introduce Stephen Lopiano, who is sitting in for Tom Charles, to present the paratransit information.
Good morning. I will begin with the paratransit report on page 14. Access-a-Ride paratransit ridership increased by 3% for the month of September. Able Ride was down by 17.9% compared to September 2009 levels. The Able Ride decrease reflects the elimination of non-ADA trips implemented as part of the 2010 budget reduction plan. For the most recent 12-month period through September 2010, Access-a-Ride ridership was up 9.3% and Able Ride was down 5.5% compared to the prior 12-month period. Requests for service in September increased by 3% for Access-a-Ride and decreased by 16.3% for Able Ride compared to September 2009. For the 12-month period, requests for service increased 9.1% for Access-A-Ride and were down 5.1% for Able-Ride. Trips completed were up 3.2% for Access-A-Ride and down by 15.6% for Able-Ride in September 2010 when compared to August 2009. For the last 12 months, completed trips were up 9.3% for Access-A-Ride and down by 5% for Able-Ride when compared to the prior 12-month period. The favorable trend regarding passenger no-shows as a percentage of scheduled trips continued for Access-A-Ride in September, as there were 19.8% fewer no-shows compared to last year. Able-Ride passenger no-shows also decreased by 19.7% in September 2010 compared to September 2009, and these results reflect stabilization of the customer confusion first experienced as a result of the elimination of the non-ADA trips. I also have an important update on the taxi card pilot. I am pleased to report that the pilot will go live on December 15th with value-added cards mailed to over 400 pilot participants. Working in conjunction with our pilot partners, the TLC and J.P. Morgan Chase, we will provide these cards preloaded for a set number of trips to paratransit customers for use on taxis south of 96th Street in Manhattan. After receiving the cards, participants will be able to activate the cards and begin using them immediately for pre-approved subscription trips. The pilot will initially run for a minimum period of 90 days, after which we will review the results. We can then decide to continue, expand, or cancel the program. I'd like to introduce Tom Del Sorbo to present the ridership, finance, and procurement sections of the agenda.
Good morning. We'll start with the ridership.
On the paratransit, you're saying a minimum of 90 days. Are we currently working on looking at how to expand the program, assuming that it's as successful as I anticipate?
Absolutely. We're not going to wait for the 90-day period to expire before we start doing some initial planning. We're already looking, like you said, in terms of it being a favorable pilot, and we're looking to expand that to a greater area in Manhattan and to the outer boroughs also.
Yeah, I would hope that Staten Island be seriously considered, because I think it could be extremely successful and could save the agency a tremendous amount of money.
We certainly will consider that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll start with the ridership report on page 13 of the committee book. For September, total fixed route ridership decreased by 3.3% in comparison to September 09. For the 12-month period, total ridership was down by 2.7% compared to the previous 12 months. Combined average weekday ridership was down 2.5 for September and 1.7 for the 12-month period. Combined average weekend ridership in September was down 0.5 for the month of September and 3.3 for the 12-month period. A closer look at ridership data for September 2010 by agency after the June service reduction shows that MTA bus ridership dropped slightly by 0.4 in September 2010 over 29. Local bus ridership was essentially flat, and express bus ridership was down 2.9. However, average weekend ridership for MTA bus rose 2.8. For Long Island bus in September, weekday ridership declined very slightly by 0.6% as compared to September 09 levels. And again, average weekend ridership rose by 3.4 as compared to September 2009. For New York City Transit bus, average weekday ridership in September fell by 2.9, and weekend ridership fell by 1.1 in September as compared to 2009 levels. Now, this morning we just received some preliminary ridership data for October that I can share with you, so it's fresh off the press. For MTA bus, average ridership for weekdays rose by 0.2% in October 2010 over October 2009. And weekend ridership improved by 5.3% in October, as local and express ridership improved by 4.7 and 15.3 in October. Long Island bus, average weekday ridership for October rose by 0.6% over 2009 levels for the same month, and weekend ridership in Long Island bus was up 9.9% also. For New York City Transit buses, average weekday ridership was down 2.3 in October, with local bus down 2.2 and express bus down 4.4. However, weekend ridership in transit was up 0.8% in October relative to 2009. So weekend ridership across the board was up pretty sizably in October. Next is the finance report, which we summarize on page 15. Fixed route fare box revenue for September was 1.7% better than forecast for MTA bus, 2.8% better than forecast for Long Island bus, but 2.3% worse than forecast for New York City Transit bus. Year-to-date, MTA bus is 2.4% better than forecast for fare box revenue. Long Island bus is up 1.3 over forecast, but New York City Transit bus is down 1.3 through September. On the expense side of the ledger, through September year-to-date, actual non-reimbursable expenses before any non-cash adjustments for MTA bus were worth $16.3 million, due again to the public liability issue that we've mentioned in previous months. For Long Island bus, we were $2.9 million better than mid-year forecast, and New York City Transit was $48.3 million better in buses than forecast year-to-date. And that summarizes the finance report. Yes?
Has there been any analysis done as to why the ridership levels seem to have spiked? For example, on the weekend, is that because some ways we're down for service? Or is there another explanation as to...
Norm and I were discussing that this morning. I think he has some insight.
Yeah, particularly in the case of MTA bus and Long Island bus, that's an area that we've been focusing on to try to rationalize and improve the service. In the case of MTA bus, it's been ongoing for 5 years. In the case of Long Island bus, particularly in the last 2 years, there have been a significant omission in their weekend service. It didn't run late enough, the service intervals weren't even. We've been working very, very hard to try to efficiently and economically adjust the service to maximize its potential, and I think you're seeing the results, the benefits of that effort.
Joe, you've done some miraculous things as chairman of all the different bus companies. Seamless integration of the private companies, refurbishing the depots, new equipment, making sense out of paratransit, but you could never really get the expenses to equal the revenues. Is there any chance that your successor might do that? Before you leave.
By Friday.
Got a big job ahead of you now.
Yeah, I see.
You're going to hear that a lot, by the way. The recurring theme, I think.
On to procurements. Okay, beginning on page 41, there are a total of 2 procurement actions this month, totaling $52.3 million in proposed expenditures for approval. The 2 actions are both non-competitive procurements, and they include the purchase of 90 high-floor, 45-foot over-the-road coaches from Prevost, as noted in the staff summary on page 48. There are no competitive procurements or ratifications this month, and
Joe just mentioned it's the first time we've bought from them.
Are those buses going to one particular division, or it's going to be across all divisions?
Can you answer that?
We're going to sign them in Staten Island and Brooklyn.
Oh, so it's going to be on transit bus, basically.
Yes, transit.
Yeah.
This is actually an exciting period. Since 1997, we've been buying our over-the-road buses from MCI, and this is the first time that we've had legitimate competition from an over-the-road bus manufacturer. So we're excited about that. And while the bus is currently manufactured in Canada, they have agreed on this particular contract, first time, to commit to 10% New York State content, and in the event that they get future awards, which would be on a competitive basis, they will migrate a portion of the build over to their subsidiary facility in Plattsburgh, New York.
Wait, 10% New York content's enough?
Well, considering the fact that they didn't have any U.S. content at all,
Are there rules towards how much?
not in this particular procurement, no.
Why?
Well, we don't use federal funds for bus procurements, and in this particular case, because it's a test and evaluation, we want to make sure that the buses work in our environment. That's why we're buying a larger population. And as I indicated, if in fact they get procurements in the future, they will migrate much more of that build over into the New York, therefore U.S. content. Well, I've gotten commitments from their CEO and president in writing to that effect. So we'd hold to them.
This is an over-the-road bus procurement. Is there an under-the-road bus company?
We haven't found it
What
yet.
does that mean?
Over-the-road buses are traditionally looked at, I'll say, like the Atlantic City type buses, where you go on large or distant type movements, as opposed to the urban buses, which travel, inside, like the 40-foot buses that we particularly use, or the 60-foot buses.
The express buses that we have, the 1998 MCIs, they're at the end of their useful life. We were trying to develop some competition to MCI, and Prevost was the only one out there that had. We do get economies when you have a 57-seat bus. We're able to it replaces the standard bus. People love the bus. It's much more comfortable. And it replaces more standard buses, because it seats 57 people. So we're hoping that this works out. We believe it will. Their buses are used all throughout North America, and we're hoping that it works out and promotes some competition with right now our only sole source, which is MCI.
Joe, one time we had to buy New York in our contracts. When does that take effect, and when doesn't it? So we know.
Those contracts, when we compete our contracts, we use local funds, and we have special legislation that allows us to evaluate New York State content in particular. As a matter of fact, the CNG bus procurement that was recently passed and submitted for your approval had New York State content as an evaluative criteria.
I mean, we know where sole source takes us, and it's never a good place. So I think it's terrific that we are finding a company that, first of all, was willing to go head-to-head with MCI on this, and secondly, is committing to do more of their work in New York State. I think, Nancy, you just have to monitor it and make sure that continues to happen, but I think this is a great development.
Motion? All in favor? Okay. So moved.
Okay. We have one information item this month on the agenda, which is the annual review of the MTA Bus Operations Committee Charter. The charter, which begins on page 56 of the committee book, is unchanged from the charter that was approved in March 2010, when the Bus Operations Committee was formed, and therefore is presented as an information item, not as an action item. And now I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Silverman for this month's one service change.
Good morning. This month there is only one service change in the committee book as an information item on page 49. The service change is for MTA Bus and represents a revision and short extension to the travel path of local bus route Q37 in South Ozone Park, and a short extension of express route QM18 also in South Ozone Park, to provide an improved and safer turnaround. If there are no questions, I will now return the floor to President Smith for final comments. Any questions?
I want to thank the members of the committee for your support. It's been great working with you. If you have any other questions? Other than that, thank you very much. Thank you again.
I would like to add a personal note here. Joe has been amongst, if not the most accessible agency president. Whenever I had a question, and you know me, I have lots of questions. Joe has always been right there, getting me an answer almost before the email is over, or he's had somebody else in his department to do that. I think this is, a huge loss for the MTA. I wish you all the best. I hope your personal situation turns out the way you hope it will, and that at some point we get to see you again, because I'm really feeling this loss, and he's not even gone yet. So this is not to take anything away from Darrell. I'm sure he's going to do a fine job, but I hope I can speak for everybody when I say we're going to miss you. It's been a real pleasure working with you, Joe, and all the best.
I guess I'd just like to pick up where Mark LeBeau touched on in what he said. This question of the formerly private bus companies, the transfer of them into the MTA was certainly difficult as just a technical matter of getting them shifted, but Joe did a extraordinary job of, once shifted, actually making sense of the kind of miscellaneous differences among the companies and actually trying to bring them into a coordinated entity for the provision of bus service. I'm sure it's not entirely done, but it's certainly a whole different situation from what it was when you started. And thank you very much.
I'd like to echo everyone else's comments. In the 2 years that I've been on this board, I've had to deal with nothing but bad news for particularly the people of Staten Island, with shrinking budgets and increasing costs. However, Joe has helped deal with very angry people, because of his personality and his knowledge, and mitigate the impacts. And in many ways actually improve service, certainly improve the physical facilities and the ability to keep buses on the roads, and has been great with the public officials and the public, and has been as responsive to me as anybody in this agency, and I'm very displeased that he'll be leaving, because I had looked forward to working with him to increase service, which I know is something that he desperately wanted to do, and shared a common vision with me for that. So, Joe, you will be missed, and I'm sorry that you won't be there with us for completing that part of the mission. Thank you.
Because you had such a long tenure here and worked at so many different jobs, I know that when we'd go around to depots and people would see you, their eyes would kind of light up, which usually doesn't happen when you see a manager. But I think people had felt that you were one of them. We certainly felt that you always had employees' interests at heart, and moreover, the passengers' interests at heart. So this is a very hard goodbye. I also noticed that you've worked with 3 female committee chair heads, Nancy Metzger, me, and Nancy. So I guess that makes you a ladies' man. And finally, to Daryl, I've had you checked out, and you come through with flying colors. Everyone speaks very highly of you, so you have big shoes to fill, but we know you'll do it. Thank you, Joe.
Joe, in the short time I've been on the board, I just wanted to thank you for your sensitivity to Long Island Bus, obviously in a very challenging environment, and for not treating it as a stepchild, and for treating it as an important agency in Long Island, in the region that carries 30 million people annually. So I thank you for that. I wish you and your family well.
Joe, obviously, everything everyone has said obviously holds true. I also want to thank you for all the work on paratransit over the last several years. I've been bugging you. I know that very happy to see the pilot hopefully starting, and I know there are a bunch of other areas of paratransit that you worked a lot on. It is, if that's the stepchild, that might be the stepchild, but it's a really important program, and I know none of the changes that have been happening would not have moved forward without you. So thanks for all your help.
Madam Chairperson, does this committee have the power to vote to refuse retirement?